You're very welcome back to Unstable TV. So we have another suggestion coming in from you guys on our American Reactions playlist. But before we get into that, if this is your first time on the channel, do not forget to
like, subscribe, comment, share, hit that bell. And if you're back with us again, thanks.
So what are we reacting on today, Danielle?
So today, James, we have been sent, could the US military conquer the UK if it wanted to? Ooh, this is from 2019, so if there is some information on this that's a bit outdated, that's why.
So let's learn this together. Let's go!
We all know US and UK are close allies, and that US armed might is far greater than that of UK. But just for argument's sake, and to learn what sort of limitations waging warfare across the ocean implies, this video will explore US invading the United Kingdom. So
Get that
with
blue
just
off,
airplanes and ships
right.
left to count on, is an invasion over the Atlantic viable? And now, could US military successfully invade UK if it wanted to? Some rules will apply. US gets no overseas bases, and all other countries are impassable. Distance from US to UK mainland is pretty big, especially when reaching London. Before trying to land any troops, the seas must first be clear of British ships, and Royal Air Force must be suppressed. US has a massive advantage when it comes to naval assets. Basically, all of its assets are made for oceans and could operate near UK if needed. While the Americans would need to sail to and from Britain, taking weeks away from their actual presence, US Navy could pretty much do whatever it pleases near the UK. It's interesting to point out that most of US ships do not carry anti-ship missiles. US Navy prefers to use their carriers for such missions. British Royal Navy is to go down a similar route. Their Harpoon missiles are old and set to be retired soon. Not all ships have them. Only a minor part of the British fleet has modern air defense systems.
Ooh.
Basically, the sea war would be fought above the sea and under it, but the British lacked anti-ship missiles for its aircraft. Furthermore, British Tornado aircraft ceased to train for the anti-ship missions almost 2 decades ago. Basically, if UK had to try and do air raids against US fleet, it would be down to 2 weapons, laser-guided bombs and short-range tactical missiles. Brimstone in particular might be the weapon of choice. While its warhead is tiny, Brimstone 2 has a decent range. Still, against dozens of potent destroyers designed to deal with many anti-ship...
Looks like Brimstone, Jamal.
Yeah, literally. So, by the sea, it already seems like America has completely won that battle.
Yeah, America's naval would just absolutely obliterate the UK. But the UK's Royal Air Force may have a small chance of fighting back.
Yeah.
But it seems like Brimstone?
Brimstone, yeah.
Looks like Brimstone is the main defender there on the seas though.
Yeah. So maybe they just need more now.
Yeah, maybe they need 100 Brimstones. Or maybe they just need another 4. Who knows?
British best bet would be their submarines. They're fairly modern. Theoretically, the British could use their ballistic missile subs as attack subs as well,
Yeah, I forgot they had
and speed
subs.
up the entry into service of another astute sub, while keeping one Trafalgar running a bit longer, rummaging for retired sailors to crew it. Still, the British would be far outnumbered. US submarine fleet dwarfs theirs. Given a bit less time on station and British home advantage when it comes to resupply, the balance of power may not be quite 6-1. Still, it's no question the British subs would get hunted down within months. Aerial anti-submarine platforms would also play a large role. And while the British could use all their assets, even just the deployable portion of US assets would be enough to force the British subs into hiding. Furthermore, US carrier-based air power would make it hard for British anti-sub helicopters to operate. The main force projection would be done by US carriers, naturally. US could choose whether to use more carriers initially and then have less available later on, or to maintain a smaller number on constant patrol. To defeat the British Air Force, the former is more likely. US nominally has 11 carriers, but only 9 air wings. It does have an additional support wing, which is a lot bigger. It may be the source of 1 or 2 more combat wings after some months of preparation. But crews aren't the only issue. Lifespan of a carrier necessarily involves lengthy maintenance.
Yeah, I forgot about that as well. It's not just, all the equipment that they all have, if they're all using the equipment for like 6 months, it has to be taken back and repaired and put back out.
Yeah.
So that's going to put like a big stop on everything as well.
There's a lot of wear and tear that needs to be managed.
Exactly. Yeah, because like it says here, it's 18 months deployable and then it's 6 months to fix, and then 18 months again. Like that's a big gap. And even if, like, I know America has the most with 11, but like they still can't have all 11 out at the same time. And then by the time they have to go back to America, fix it and come back to England, that's going to take a lot of time.
Yeah.
That's probably going to slow them down a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%.
Periods. Important to note is that the deployable period doesn't mean the carrier can actually be on a mission the whole time. Usually 1 or 2 deployments are made during those 18 months. Missions are usually 6 to 8 months long, and several months are needed to prep the carrier and its wing for another mission. Shorter missions might give more deployments in the short term, but in the long term they would require even more maintenance for every month spent out at sea. Because of all that, it's unrealistic US would send out more than 6 carriers at once, after a few months of prep time. Similar issues would affect the aviation assault ships. Perhaps 4 to 6 could be deployed at once, after some preparations. Grand total of combat planes US Navy and Marine Corps could muster in a few months long air campaign is thus smaller than the total number of US planes. US might fly in fresh planes to replace ones that got lost. Flying them over the ocean to a carrier would be doable. What could the British respond with? Royal Air Force is smaller than even the readily available US planes deployed on carriers. Another huge issue for the British would be their lack of air defenses. Everything they currently have are fairly low altitude systems, meaning the US would be free to bomb them from high up with guided weapons. UK would also suffer the US cruise missile barrage. While the Brits have some such missiles of their own, it's unlikely they would be used against the faraway US bases. Even the subs that could carry them would be better utilized for defense of the homeland. While not all could be launched at once, US could sustain the effort. The British Air Force would be mostly paralyzed on the ground. US has also a much bigger recon platform fleet, especially when it comes to satellites. British lack those, as in the real world they timeshare some US spy satellites. US aircraft would be looking for targets as well. Britain would have no real means of scouting the US bases. US AWACS type planes would be plentiful, while British ones would mostly be trapped on the ground, with runways and highways being mostly inoperative. Thus the Royal Air Force would slowly get destroyed on the ground. When they would be able to get some planes airborne, they still may not choose to engage the Americans, as it's likely US attack waves would be made of close to 100 planes with possibly as many fighters as Britain would muster per each local interception, or more. The best Britain could hope for would be a roughly equal kill ratio in the air, and when the losses on the ground are included, over months of a protracted bombing campaign, US would still be left with a sizable force. All this didn't even include the US Air Force. While the scenario requires it to use the bases inside the US, Britain could be reached. At first, bombers would be deploying cruise missiles, but later on they would be likely used for bombing missions. But could the Air Force tactical plane fleet help out as well? With very ample in-flight refueling, the answer is yes. US operates the world's biggest air tanker fleet. The Hercules-based tankers, however, are too small and would use most of the fuel just to get near Britain. Still, the remainder of the fleet has a substantial fuel offload capacity, and tankers could refuel each other. Such ops may sound complex.
How are they refueling each other?
Mid-air refueling?
Did we hear that right?
I think we've seen it in a military video, either on a comparison or another American video, that they have like mid-air refuels. Remember, like it's like a needle thing that injects into it.
Yeah, I vaguely remember. Yeah.
It has like, it looks like it has parachutes on the front of it when it's like going into it.
That's wild.
I forgot they have mid-air refuel. USA have all of it. No wonder they're the #1 superpower.
No, literally, England doesn't have a chance.
England's getting absolutely frolicked.
But compared to what the British did in Falklands War, they're fairly basic. The British used a dozen tankers to refuel themselves repeatedly, keeping the bomber refueled throughout all of the route. While all of the tanker fleet would not be available due to maintenance, the rest could still offload significant fuel loads just outside Britain if needed. With several refuelings per plane, US Air Force could still expect to have around 400 combat planes in action practically every day. The British would really have no chance in the air. Within months, the US would have complete control of the air. And thus the second phase of the invasion might commence. By that time, British ships would be mostly dead, even if they hugged the shores and just aided in the air defenses. British submarines might hold out a bit longer, if not being used to actively hunt down US ships. But even if British subs managed to kill 2 US vessels for each of their own, final result would be the end of the Royal Navy.
Wow.
So at around 6 months or so into the war, the landings would be mostly unopposed, except for the Royal Army defending the shores. 6 months would be enough for US to assemble pretty much all of their active and reserve assets. In addition to landing ships, US could count on numerous cargo assets of its Sea Lift Command and Reserve Fleet in case a port is secured. US Airborne could also help, with the numbers shown probably growing with newly trained paratroopers. Getting additional heavier equipment for them, however, would not be likely, given the time limit. US transport plane fleet is pretty big, and should be able to drop all the airborne troops within days. US could be looking at close to 30,000 troops during the first day, and close to 20,000 more the day after. Subsequent days would see fewer and fewer troops being added, and more supplies being brought in. The British would enjoy more soldiers than shown before. The reserve mentioned covers only the soldiers receiving some training periodically, and soldiers for whom some heavy equipment is stored. In an event of a total war, Britain would be using those 6 months to mobilize as many soldiers as possible. While they would be equipped with basically just rifles, and while their training would be less than adequate, they would still boost the overall numbers several times. Yet all those soldiers may not be enough, as UK has a problem of geography. Its landmass is just too large. Its coastline is very long. Even when taking just the western part of its coastline into account, the area to be defended is huge. And what about the islands? Perfect for US to take and entrench themselves at, before launching further landings from them. Most of those areas are sufficiently far away from the mainland that British artillery would not be much of a factor. And what about Northern Ireland? There are just too many places for US to concentrate its assault on.
Poor Ireland's just stuck there in the middle.
Yeah, like...
We'd well get bombed as well if that happened.
Of course we would. It's literally like World War II where they just bombed Belfast for the sake of it. But anyway.
Well, Belfast is part of the UK now. So if they were bombing Belfast, but then, see, that's a tricky one as well because, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, see, we're neutral, but we're not neutral when we're going to be caught in the crossfire in this hypothetical situation. Ireland's just, you know, trying to chill out, have a few points, play some trad music and enjoy the scenes while this is all going on. Just bombardment of wars. And I'm sure if this was going on, we'd all do what all Irish people do. Make jokes about it.
Yeah. Like, we'd all just be standing there, like, looking at the sky, being like, what's happening today?
Free fireworks.
But I mean, like, there's nothing, like, what can we do if America drops a bomb? Nothing.
There's absolutely zero we can do about it.
No.
But what we can do is have a good time at our own expense.
Exactly. I was just thinking that the whole way through. I was like, Ireland is literally just in the middle of all that. All of it.
Yeah.
If this did happen, we just kind of have to hope and pray that we didn't get involved.
Yeah, every 2 seconds it would just be from air storms.
British would not be able to move their forces around easily and protect those islands or the Northern Ireland. So the islands would fall one by one. Then either Northern Ireland would be taken or part of Great Britain would fall. Hard to traverse overland Scotland would be an obvious choice, though that would also slow down US breakthrough as well later on. Cornwall or Devon are also decent picks, as British defenders lack room to swoop down on the US beachhead from all directions, though such areas would likely be more heavily populated by British military to begin with. Once the US manages to secure ports and airfields and brings in US Army reinforcements, it would be basically game over for the British. US would build up its helicopter force on the areas it has taken, which is considerable. While the British have a fleet of their own to help quickly distribute its forces where needed, their numbers are small. Both sides would of course be using many helicopters, US to British low-level air defenses and British to US fighter cover, which would continuously be flying over the important areas. the British would have only a small part of shown inventory of heavy weapons present at any one point the US attacks. While US would also not be disembarking thousands of its Abrams tanks or 10,000 of other heavy combat vehicles, the overwhelming fire support coming from various directions would more than make up for it. Fire support from the ships may come in form of MLR units firing from the ships rather than actual gun barrage. US ships still lack long-range gun rounds. Attack helicopters are another way of concentrating force in one area quickly. But again, the British are far outmatched, even if just half of US numbers are present. The issue for the Americans would be time. As the scenario asks what can be achieved within 1 year, US would be under pressure to progress from their multiple beachheads. Northern Ireland is likely to fall within the 1 year time limit, but only minor parts of the Great Britain would be overrun by the Americans during the same time period. The British would put up a hell of a fight. Ground troop loss ratio would favor the British somewhat, but when Air Force and Navy losses are added in, where Britain would suffer more heavily, the US would come out fine. With added large chunks of conquered territory, the US could call itself a victor.
Surprised. We're not surprised that USA came out the victor on that one. Now, England put up a good hypothetical fight there, but you know, they need the aid of the Irish. We're not surprised.
Well, it's not the aid of the Irish, they own Northern Ireland as well, so it would be, like, realistically, from what our like small knowledge of military and army stuff that we're learning, it probably would be really easy for America to take over Northern Ireland. Like they said, going in there and doing that within the year does seem plausible. And then like the smaller parts of England seems plausible as well. So
Northern Ireland would fall straight away because one man would care.
that's true.
That's the sad reality, because we'd be like, yeah, go on. Like,
No, but America has too much stuff. It really does. And I know that was from 2019, but they have everything.
that's why they're number one superpower of the world.
Exactly. So I don't think England would. I think, like you said, they would put up a good fight, but I don't think they'll win. Do you think?
No, I don't think England will win that. There's too much. Like, America have the naval covered, and then straight away, like you said, they close off their runways with like stealth bombers, like UAVs, be able to tell the location. And before you could get anything off the ground, sure, the runway would be destroyed.
Yeah. It's very, very scary to see all that though. Like even just looking at the numbers, let alone looking at what could actually happen, is terrifying. I hope it doesn't happen, because that'd be awful for everybody involved. Be so many civilians that'd just be gone for no reason.
The worst part is, regardless of any war, it's never really the government officials that suffer. It's always the people. It's always the people on the front lines fighting the richest war. But that's the reality, and let's have a discussion about it down below. But of course, do make sure you check out the original content creator. Make sure you give them a like, subscribe and share, all of that good YouTube stuff.
Absolutely.
And a very big shout out to you guys for suggesting this.
Yeah, let us know what you think about wars in the comments down below. Do you think they're necessary? Are they a necessary evil? Or are they just so outdated now that there surely needs to be something else to figure out all this conflict?
That's been our 2 cents, and we will chop ourselves out of this.